This is Rydo, and we're back to another live stream of Shadowverse. Today is Friday, July 16th, and I'm finally starting at a decent time instead of oversleeping and starting well past midnight in some instances. Let's hop into Shadowverse. We don't really have a ton of news today, so this could be a fairly short stream as it goes. We'll just have to wait and see, I suppose. I did manage to play a little bit of Dead Space 3. It really is going nowhere, though. Like, the biggest standout difference that's fairly obvious here is the fact that there is just no there are no boss fights in the game at all. Like, yeah, you have some regenerators that chase you in a couple chapters, but there's no special necromorph you've never seen before. There's no giant necromorph. There's no big setup for anything. The game seems to be teasing one boss fight, maybe two, at the very end of 19 chapters. I'm on the 9th chapter. I really have to question where the other 9 chapters are going to go, considering the way it's been going so far. I guess we want to reroll this one. That would be the better one to reroll. And so then that leaves us with Forestcraft, Swordcraft, Bloodcraft, and Dragoncraft. Why is my mouse wheel not really reacting here? I'm like having my mouse wheel up a lot before it starts moving. That's weird. Let me just try it on this other. Yeah, I wonder if my battery's low. Like, it's not. No. Maybe it's the Chrome extension. I don't know. Why would the Chrome extension be affecting the Shadowverse, though? So something wonky is happening. Like, I desperately need to reset my computer in general, because the monitors are all messed up. But whatever. I just finished Dead Space. First and foremost. I'm still working on using WinSCP to back up my Windows installation, because it's just like copying the files. There's a decent chance that some of the Windows files are not being actually copied, and so you couldn't just copy it to a new disk and it run. Which inherently, that is always the problem with Windows these days, is that there's no good way to make a system image backup, and they don't even really want you to. They just want you to back up your files and install a new version of Windows, which that setup is a hassle too. But yeah, one of the things about WinSCP that seems to be a case is you need to, on a DDWRT router, tell it that the language is UTF-8. Otherwise, some special file names will not copy over, which is easy enough to do. It's just setting an environment variable. So you type in capital LANG equals capital UTF-8 and just hit enter on the command line, and that establishes it, at least for the moment. You probably have to do something to make that permanent between reboots, and I'll do that in kind of a janky way, I imagine. But it does seem like it mostly is working, so I'm not super concerned. It does seem like WinSCP is gonna happen. I do have some concerns that this hard drive I have is an exFAT file system, and I don't know for backups, since backups have a little bit more stability and are a little bit more complicated. Maybe an NTFS file format might be better for backups. Plus, if I did format the hard drive and make it an NTFS format, I could enable compression, which is absolutely necessary almost always, as far as backups. And I could also make a partition that's specifically a swap partition instead of using a swap file, because there was something that went wrong with my swap file that corrupted it, and that potentially goes right back to the circle thought that XFAT's file system not using a journaling file system, which is kind of too complicated to explain. I don't know if I even understand it myself. But because it doesn't have a journal filing system, corrupt files might be able to get corrupted a little bit more easily. And or the scanning to fix corruption might take a little bit longer. I'm still working on the irrigation manifold box project. I'm waiting for a drill bit right now, and then I think by probably Wednesday I will have finished it, assuming I don't run into any major hassles just installing it on the wall, which that is still a potential issue, is that just getting everything to squeeze into a tight box is kind of the last major concern. Okay.
It looks like I'm up.
Go ahead and play that, I guess. But yeah, when I say it out loud, it doesn't really sound like I've done too much, and I think more of that has to do with, yes, I still am sleeping an incredible amount, but I think more of it has to do with I'm just putting my head down and playing Dead Space 3 and not getting too distracted on other things. I still feel like I have dropped the ball in a certain point in which I've let a lot of YouTube happen, and there's probably some improvement that needs to happen there, as far as I have a lot of like YouTube playing in the background, which is distracting me instead of just playing games and making content. The Destiny Child cell phone game I'm still playing, I did want to mention they've gone to a new level as a lewd adult game. At least the Tap version, which is less censored or uncensored than the Google Play version. They have introduced a skin for the newest character, Tiwaz, Tiwaz is her name, and she is literally topless at this point in a bunny suit. She is wearing pasties, heart pasties, yes, but it is just taking it to a certain extreme. There have been some characters with nip slips that they've done in these little anime characters, but to go the full cleavage all the way around route is a new extreme, particularly when you're heavily focusing on it.
Sorry, but the time for one helping of this and it's 90 that for you.
And I don't know how they would specifically even censor it too much, because that outfit is part of the actual story that's going on of like T-Waz and her husband
Nothing personal. It's
getting
just
poisoning each other with love potions and falling in love with other people.
to spare or slay. It's all the same to me.
But I suppose that's a long-winded way of saying I'm still finding they are finding new and innovative ways to make me enjoy Destiny Child way more than any other cell phone game I've ever played. I'm still playing College Days, and they have like a straight up error in one of their new content. They are adding new content, I'll give them that much, but they've put the wrong thing, the wrong images in the wrong scenario, which is just kind of ridiculous. Should have evolved this one instead.
Well, that's too bad.
But yeah, in the Destiny Child Defense War game, it's going further down the direction of Destiny Child, in the sense that it's just adding more and more content and more ways that you could spend money. The big difference, though, between Defense War and the original Destiny Child game is Defense War is a game that can't really be automated. It's not a game that's particularly fun. It is just kind of a tower defense game that you really would have to like the gameplay mechanic a lot more to really want to stick with it. There's limiting factors, and you get chests, and the chests take a certain amount of time to open, and you just really don't have that in Destiny Child. Destiny Child Defense War is made by a different company, and they just licensed the images and the characters, since that's why it plays completely different.
My quarry won't escape.
But yeah,
Mother, father.
there is a stamina in the original Destiny Child, so you can be limited when you run out of stamina. You will be limited if you don't have the premium currency to open to do like loot pools, because it is a gacha game. But of the gameplay it gives you, you can kind of play as much as you want if you really wanted to. But I don't think there is a significant number of people that play the game in an unautomated fashion. The game is not about whether you can click a button or drag a slider in Destiny Child. It is much more about, can you play this management sim in which you're managing resources. That being said, I don't know. It would be nice if a game like that could reboot and have different seasons for new players, or be skewed based on when you started playing, because I really doubt that a new player would ever really be able to catch up or feel like they're anywhere close to making progress on Destiny Child at this point.
I'll discipline you down to your soul.
Like, I was even a year late, and I'm still struggling somewhat to find to catch up, and I spent a considerable amount of time not being able to catch up before then. Yeah, I feel like there should be something else we should be talking about instead of this, though, as far as the accountability section, but really there isn't, so I think we're going to just stop at 14 minutes and move into the news, which, hey, it's a Friday, having things go fast would be fine. The biggest news is that, sort of out of nowhere, Valve has announced a device, a computer that looks a lot like the Switch. We'll be talking about it a lot through news articles. I do want to give my first impressions. Though there is a question, certainly
Double check.
as far as the video graphics power and the screen resolution, it has a 7-inch 16 by 10 monitor that does not go up to 1080p. It is somewhere, I think, closer to 720p with a little bit of a bezel. And honestly, if you compare that to cell phones, big cell phones, gaming cell phones, you would expect to see a little bit more, or I would expect to see a little bit more on it. The price tag screams unnecessary for OLED instead of just an LCD, and that might be a part shortage issue, certainly. The OLED they're estimating for the new Switch OLED version is going to cost Nintendo $10 more to make that switch compared to what the screen that was there before, which I would gladly pay $20 more on the Steam Deck to have an OLED that is 9 inches versus a 7-inch screen, even if you're not improving the resolution on it. It has 2 touchpads, which is an interesting idea, but I don't know how that really actually works. Like, which one of those touchpads is actually a mouse and running through the SteamOS Linux build as a mouse, and which of those touchpads are being treated as something else, some kind of, I don't know, like, I don't, that's the weird thing, is I've never known Linux, I've never seen a Linux build where a touchpad, 2 touchpads were connected at the same time and they were somehow programmed to do different things. Typically when you plug in 2 mouses into Windows, for comparison, the 2 mouses do the exact same thing. So, yeah, I don't know what big differentiation you can have there. There might be some issues with the layout of the Steam Deck. It really is a device that I kind of want to get into my hands and just get a feel of it, because if it's designed too small for little kids, that would be a huge mistake. And then certainly the Steam Deck is being compared as to the Switch, when really there's no comparison. It really is apples to oranges, because the Steam Deck is just going to let you play your Steam games, not very many of which are designed to be played at a 16 by 10 less than 1080p resolution screen, whereas the Switch is playing Nintendo games. So unless Nintendo started releasing games on Steam, then it starts to make sense. There's a decent argument to say that this might be the new wave of Steam boxes, and we'll see other companies very much introduce the idea of Steam Deck-like devices following suit, and they'll make slight changes. I also think it's kind of weird that there isn't a USB-C port on the top of the Steam Deck where you could have a camera, because if you're comparing this to a cell phone, which is really where you should be comparing it to, there should be a camera, front-facing camera there, so that you can, like, video chat with people. There is a microphone on the device, so that thought exists, which also inherently that means any parent who's concerned about cameras or microphones is concerned. I could see the Switch Deck working really well for a Zoom machine if you were handing it to a kid and saying, well, I know you need to Zoom for school, although I don't think too many kids are even Zooming for school anymore. I could see you making that argument instead of handing a laptop to somebody, particularly a gaming laptop. There are 3 different versions of the Steam Deck. The different versions have to do with the speed and the amount of storage space on it, none of which is particularly great, like as far as storage. If you're gonna play some giant game that's over like 100 gigabytes to install, you're probably not going to be able to play it on the Steam Deck. Maybe at some point streaming features will allow for something like that in the future, which arguably, if you are going to start streaming the big AAA games to a device like that, then it works fine, and it very well may be a nice middle ground where things like The Binding of Isaac play off of it directly perfectly fine, and it makes a good secondary device for people who want to stream AAA games but don't want to be in front of their computer and have anybody else using their computer while they're streaming. I don't think you're going to be able to do both. There is a question as far as what the USB-C hub's network connection would be, whether it would be gigabit or higher. So you might, if you do dock it, which at a certain point the idea of docking it makes a lot less sense. You probably are going to get a gigabit at most, maybe just 100 megabits per second on your network. Otherwise, you are set up with 5 gigahertz and 2 gigahertz Wi-Fi, 802.11.AC. So, yeah, you could get, I think, about 600 megabits per second on the Wi-Fi if you have that much speed to your internet. Otherwise, you're limited by your internet as usual. Okay, we can do this. And I guess we can do this. I guess we can do this. And we'll save to see if we can do this twice. Maybe that'll work. The amount of RAM is fairly low. I think it's about 16 gigabytes, maybe 8 gigabytes of RAM, but it's GDDR5, which also makes me wonder if the video RAM and the game RAM are being pulled together and being used at the same amount, which game consoles kind of do that, or some of them do. The newest ones, I think, do. It certainly is a conversation starter, to say the least. But I kind of wonder if there isn't going to be an upgraded version fairly quickly. I would still prefer to get a cheap, used Nintendo Switch to play the Nintendo games first before I would think about getting a Steam Deck. As a streamer, there really is no consideration amongst streamers there that you would they would.
Help me, fairies.
Let's see.
I'm gonna rest for a
Is
bit.
there anything I can do? I mean, I can just play a whole bunch of cards.
Hey, let's play. Let's play. Let's play. Let's play. Sight, check. Frills, double check.
Yep. But yeah, it definitely feels like an interesting conversation starter. It doesn't integrate anything with VR, which is weird. Certainly, it doesn't bring back any thoughts as far as the Steam controller or the Steam Link. You might make an argument that the Steam controller patent fights to just have the Steam controller be a thing necessitated that the Steam Deck exists, because they'd already done that work.
Stop it.
And that is a possibility, or at least a way to look at it. But yeah, there's still issues, to say the least. Hit this,
Even in
and then hit this.
You want to hunt? Be my guest.
Adorable to the end.
And then
This is the end.
hit this.
That beast is my savior. You want to hunt? Be my guest.
Adorable to the end.
Hmm.
You doing this?
These wheels turn for me. Come at me well.
Adorable to the end.
So I pretty much lose if he can do one damage here, or just wait. Like, I could maybe tie if he can leave me with one damage. So here we have the Gamma Sutra's analyst. Despite similarities, Steam Deck is not in competition with the Nintendo Switch. Here's an opinion piece you can read if you're interested. Let's see. This is Rainbow Six Extraction has been delayed. This Ubisoft website's a mess as far as ads. Gamatsu has Riders Republic has been delayed to October 28th. It's no longer coming out September 2nd. I imagine we're going to see a lot of delays fairly quickly. Song of Iron launches August 31st, according to Gamatsu.
Stop it.
Let's see if we can play this. Why?
Ooh, it's shiny.
Why is my mouse? That is really irritating. I'm going to turn off my mouse and turn it back on and see if that fixes it. So, Song of Iron is a hack and slash game. It looks like it might be something here, but it also could be fairly boring where you're just walking in circles.
Hey, let's play.
Alright, well, you end the turn here.
Marksmanship.
Do I lose or does it tie? Nope, you lose. No big surprise there. I should have probably kept all the Steam Deck information at the front of the list so we could talk about it all at once, but yeah. They really should have teased that and wound it up. It seems like they intentionally are putting it out there to eat the lunch of the Nintendo Switch OLED version, which I don't really know why you would do that. Although, in all fairness, the Nintendo Switch OLED version should have been announced at E3, which would have made a lot more sense. In fact, all of these announcements would make a lot more sense if they were a couple weeks earlier, because then the pre-orders for the Steam Deck would have been right in line with the summer sale, and then there would have been a lot more happening certainly during the summer sale. They are limiting pre-orders to accounts that bought something in the previous month, so if you didn't buy anything in the summer sale or at any point previously, and your account is just brand new on Steam, which there's probably very few legitimate brand new accounts on Steam, you can't buy the Steam Deck, which is not coming out till December anyways. Who knows how many are actually going to get made or sold. It's not like Valve has the longest history making hardware also, so there is a decent chance that the whole thing bursts into flames and doesn't run anywhere as good as you think it would, even though it does have like some AMD Zen architecture assistance in it. This game Gorn, which is published by Devolver Digital, has sold over 1 million copies on all platforms, which is interesting, I would say. Like, normally when I cover a game that has sold over 1 million copies, it's a game that feels like it kind of deserves that. Whereas in this case, it's kind of more shocking than anything that it sold 1 million copies.
Help me, fairy.
Because it's not much of a game from what I could tell. Your Video Game Chronicles has the same article. Ubisoft has delayed both Rainbow Six Extraction and Riders Republic. Publisher says both games need more testing to bring them to market.
Got your message loud and clear.
OpenZFS version 2.1 is out for anybody who is interested in the evolving ZFS RAID array protocol.
No way!
Here we have a Video Game Chronicle says Xbox's boss is worried that gaming is losing its history. Phil Spencer calls for an industry-wide initiative to preserve older video games. Good move, in my opinion. Certainly, although in all fairness, Microsoft and Xbox is kind of one of the moving factors as to why games are not preserved. So they definitely have some guilt there, considering they've shut down like original Xbox and Xbox 360 services. They have not put out like the source code for older versions of like the dashboards or anything like that, which they could have open sourced a lot of that stuff. So yeah, but when you start to talk about really old games, Commodore 64 type games too, there's this issue certainly that most people are not particularly interested in having their own copy of like 6,000 Commodore 64 games, that, of which maybe 20 are worth even talking about. So there is a labor of love there that needs to happen around full, complete museum quality collections of old games, both physical and just digital versions of the ROMs. Even the NES, like of the NES games, you could have all 600 to 800. I'm not sure how many really was. It's somewhere around there. Games that play on the NES, or licensed to play on the NES, but of those, there's probably only 100 worth even talking about. And when you get away from first-party titles, that list gets very small. It would be kind of nice if they put their money where their mouth was a little bit more, instead of just playing lip service to something like that, and had an initiative, a storage facility to preserve old games, a museum of some sort. It wouldn't really hurt too bad if Microsoft built a video game museum.
You want to hunt?
and said they were going to preserve
The hunt has only begun.
preserve video games of all sorts.
He's my savior.
All I need's an opening and you're toast.
Okay, that didn't go too bad. Video Game Chronicles has an article here. Capcom promises to improve Resident Evil Village PC after fans highlight the DRM impact. Publisher says a patch is coming after the fan hack highlighted performance issues. We talked about this on Wednesday. There's an interesting point between this also, in that they have also delayed the multiplayer spin-off by more than half a year for Resident Evil Reverse, now slipping to 2022, which obviously, like, most people can do the math here. The resources to make a multiplayer live service game that could be used to get them microtransactions and just continued gameplay, continued revenue,
You want to hunt?
that stuff would have been the stuff that the effort to make Reverse, if Reverse was never on the table, that effort would have been put to making sure Resident Evil Village ran better on PC and consoles in general. And it interestingly has highlighted an issue. Had this multiplayer been integrated and not a separate product into Village, they could say that they are working on Resident Evil Village when really all they were working on was the multiplayer, and they could try to obfuscate the fact that they were just working on the multiplayer. Like, Reverse is going to be free to owners of Village anyway, so unless there are some microtransactions in it, if anything, it feels like they've just dropped the ball in general, and that they couldn't get the multiplayer working, and that's why it's not coming out day and date as far as the single player. And now they have a scenario where they're having to delay the multiplayer even more because they didn't have enough people working on the game in the first place.
The uncharted desert awaits.
Yeah, Capcom definitely does not come off looking good from this whole mess, and it really is just
I won't let you get away.
a mess of their own making
I'm ready for more. What do we
by
have
being
here?
cheap, I guess is all you could call it. I think that's what it boils down to, is that they were being cheap and being lazy. The next Epic Games free stores are Defense Grid and Verdun are replacing Abduction and Off-World Trading Company next week, which I didn't realize Abduction was the Epic Games Store free one. I've not been checking that as much as I probably should. Abduction is definitely a game that if you get it for free from the creators of Myst, that it's worth a single play through. It's not really worth putting any more time on that.
Enough with these feeble-minded infants.
Video Game Chronicles says EA has suggested it's not planning to reveal any new Star Wars games until 2022. There is definitely a thought here. I'm fairly mad at EA playing Dead Space 3, but that was almost inevitable, just on how terribly they treated Dead Space 3. But there's an argument here that more of this is on the shoulders of Disney more than even on the shoulders of EA.
So pricey.
That Disney, remember, was not very interested in having any video game tie-ins, and they kind of pulled back from that, and they were mostly just licensing Battlefront to EA, and they kind of pulled support, if I recall correctly, for a lot of projects. Well, now during the pandemic, Disney has lost a lot of its revenue, and it could have had that revenue, that backup revenue, during the pandemic, because right now people can't go to movie theaters as much, they can't go to Disney theme parks as much. There's arguably, regardless of who you ask, unless they're a huge Disney fanboy, there's been at least a few missteps with the Marvel and Star Wars creations. So not everything was a huge success for them. Had they had a third pillar to support them in the form of licensed video games, just always in their back pocket. Every year there's going to be a new Star Wars everywhere game, or 2 or 3 new Star Wars games every year. There should be a new Marvel game, or 2 or 3 Marvel games. Had those been set up and ready to go, they could have leaned on those profits to balance their books a little bit better. Speaking of Hollywood, the HBO's Last of Us series has added Tommy's voice actor and cast Bill and Frank. Jeffrey Pierce isn't reprising his role as Joel's brother, though. Which, whatever. Let's see. Characters instead being played by Gabriel Luna from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I couldn't even tell you which character that was. This is all a little inside baseball. See, this actress looks fairly young. In fact, he looks fairly young too. There is a danger, certainly by the time all of this gets produced and shot, though, that growth spurt happens here. This guy probably won't age that much. So we might ironically have a scenario that if the Last of Us HBO series went a couple extra seasons, the later seasons, the Ellie character might look way different, much like the game. Although arguably Ellie looking different in Last of Us 2 isn't the main complaint. The main complaint is her acting severely different, or feeling like she's acting severely different. Let's see. Metsu has the same article about Resident Evil Reverse. I guess this highlights the characters that they had shown were going to be in Reverse, which, yeah, that's probably the expected cast. Toplan Shoot 'em Up Collection Kyoku Tiger Heli has been announced for PS4 and Switch, which, if it's a shoot 'em up, let's see if we can actually see some gameplay. Yep, it looks like just an old shoot 'em up helicopter game with also maybe some other games, side game concepts that they probably tried out.
All I need's an opening and you're toast.
Let's see. My Singing Monsters Playground launches in November. This is new to me. I haven't seen this game before. Let's see if we can get a general idea. Yep, it looks like it's a Mario Party player versus player game.
My little red dress.
You broke the curse?
Come here,
Got your message loud and clear.
Pokemon Unite for Switch launches July 21st. What is Pokemon Unite? I think Unite is the software that connects with Pokemon Go. It gives you something for Zero Aura. Is that what this character is? Zero Aura? See, or is Pokemon Unite the one where it's the more RPG game where you don't have trainers? No, it seems like you have trainers. It seems like what they're trying to make is something that is kind of like a MMO RPG game or a faster paced hack and slash game. This is Zero Aura. Alright, is Unite free? It's free to start with optional in-game purchases. Well, I guess if you have any interest whatsoever in playing a Pokemon game, you probably should install Pokemon Unite. I don't know if Pokemon really is a better game if it does go into a higher action, like kind of Diablo top-down beat 'em up game, hack and slash game, compared to the slower action RPG turn-based gameplay. I think Pokemon, at a certain level, you have to disassociate from the Pokemon characters, which would be cute in almost anything, and just evaluate which you think would actually be the better experience. And I bet Unite probably is a more modern, better experience option out there. Moving on, Gematsu has The Cruel King and the Great Hero coming to the West in early 2022, which just feels like this is pretty much the third game I've seen that looks very similar but has a different name, which I don't know if we've just had a whole trilogy of games in a series and they just have not gotten that much play because they're NIS games. It launched on the PS4 and Switch on June 24th. Oh, it was previously called The Wicked King and the Noble Hero. Right, well, that explains why at least a couple of the games are differently named. There you go, we got a opponent disconnecting.
Looks like I won.
I'll take that free victory. We don't get that enough though that we could make it up to like an A tier. Gematsu says the Away the Survival series adds a PS5 version and it launches this summer. This looks like you're playing as a sugar glider rodent. That would be my guess as far as what this is. But apparently you also play as other animals.
I won't let my sins define.
Remember there was that game where you played as a monkey and a gorilla trying to survive that nobody would give the time of day or even or liked, and I feel like the creator of that game was very lack of grace, disgraceful in his reception of the bad reviews, and the fact that it was just too weird and too out there. So I'm not sure if that has to do with the style or the substance of those types of games. We've seen a few survival games, and they always seem to be a little unique, but I don't know if I've actually seen one that has been well received or well polished. Like, it is very possibly the type of game that we just don't know what a polished, good version of that type of game could be, if such a thing even exists. Betsu has an article here. Warhammer 40k Dark Tide has been delayed to spring of 2022. This was a PC Xbox Series game. Yeah, just more delays. Weird West has added a PS4 and Xbox One version and launches this fall. Yeah, I guess you are going one way or the other. Either you're having games that say, oh, we're doing so well, we're on track, we've got something else to announce, to tease it, or we're adding something. And then you have a lot of games that are just straight up delaying things. And it's really not surprising that a lot of delays are happening. It seems to be the standard fare in Japanese games to announce something and then immediately delay it, but seems like the Western world is also embracing that mentality, which is not super surprising with the pandemic. Gametsu says the interactive story game Wayward Strand adds a PS5 and PS4 version. It's due out in 2022. I haven't seen this game before. Grandma in some kind of retirement. Feels like they're on a boat. It's waving back and forth. This is an interesting art style, certainly. So often you have like either hyper realistic art styles or you go with the anime art style. So to see somebody actually try something different is always appreciated. It is some kind of floating ship.
My prayers shall reach the heavens.
Gametsu has Tetris Effect Connected coming for the PS4, Epic Games Store, Steam, and Oculus Quest on August 18th. Cool. Tetris Effect is already out, so you can buy it now and you just get a free update to make it connected. Although I personally would still only be playing the single player versions and content on Tetris Effect. I would like to play it, but I'm also not super hyped on that concept enough that I would put out any special effort to play it. Because at the end of the day, it is just going to be Tetris. Guilty Gear Strive shipments and digital sales have topped 500,000. Its first DLC character is going to be announced July 20th. So, yeah, fighting game Guilty Gear Strive doing fairly well. Monster Hunter Legends of the Guild premieres August 12th on Netflix. I watched the trailer of this. Yeah, it's Monster Hunter, but it's also kind of cartoony. It's not, I think, quite what you would expect if you had watched, if you had played Monster Hunter World and only Monster Hunter World. But it's not quite as cartoony either as Monster Hunter Stories, if I can. So it's kind of in the middle there. Though the action sequence will certainly determine a lot as far as any Monster Hunter anime or any cartoon. I may have failed to mention it but the next Netflix Castlevania series is going to follow one of the werewolf characters. So they are going to reboot it in part to not follow the characters that had been around since the beginning of the series, or all of them at least. Which is probably a good idea because they particularly in the second season introduced a lot of characters, and they didn't really have the time or the writing to introduce that many characters, so it didn't play out as well as it could have, in my opinion. In comparison here, since we're looking at the Famitsu sales being updated, this is the Monster Hunter Stories game and what those characters look like compared to the Monster Hunter anime, and this is much more Breath of the Wild CG, soft cell CG animation, and the characters are definitely a lot more colorful. So yeah, Monster Hunter Stories 2, Rings of Ruin. From what I can tell, Monster Hunter Stories 1 was a 3DS game. I think that's what I looked up. And so you are in this weird position where you kind of would have to have either played the 3DS game or you're just going to have to skip to the second one. And that's a very hard sell, certainly. We can get a general idea as far as the new 3DS has fallen completely off the list now. The new 2DS LL is still outselling the Xbox Series X and Series S, which the X and S had a pretty good sales week a couple weeks previous.
This is where I truly shine.
Let's see, the Switch Lite and Switch are still severely outselling it. Even the Switch Lite is beating the PlayStation 5, and the PlayStation 5 is severely outbeating the PlayStation 5 Digital Edition, PS4. I mean, it really is just basically a tie for 5th place when you look at the difference in numbers between the Xbox Series S and the PlayStation 4. That being said, when you look at the total numbers of the PlayStation 4, 7 million compared to PlayStation, Xbox Series X and S making 60,000 sales, and the PlayStation 5 selling 800,000 plus of units. So it'll be a while, certainly, before you could actually claim that the PlayStation was totally dead in Japan. It's going to be a long 4 to 8 years before we would really see PlayStation completely die. And Microsoft is not really doing what it needs to do to eat up the difference there. I think what we'll eventually start seeing, more likely over the course of 4 to 8 years, is cell phone hardware sales being counted. A series of gaming cell phones in particular starting to show it. Because if we did look at how many new cell phones were being bought any week in Japan, it would probably be in the tens of thousands, if not higher. So it would be in the 4th or 2nd spot to the Switch. And Nintendo will almost certainly make a Switch 2 or something that continues to get the Japanese audience to keep buying it.
Time to go lickety swift.
If they don't, then that would potentially be the end of Nintendo.
I shall give birth to a new world.
Oh, this is annoying. Is there anything we can do to recover health? If this guy can do 1 damage to me,
I shall give birth to
I
a new
lose. Which you can just by attacking.
Nice marksmanship.
Oh, they're having us play this Grand Prix. I'll probably get us 30 gold. 20 gold and a card pack, not too bad. And theoretically, if I had extra time, I would come back over the weekend and play every day and play more of that. Meanwhile, we can stick with Forestcraft since we haven't been playing Forestcraft that much. And then we'll get to Swordcraft and Bloodcraft later. Let's see, rotation. Do we have anything that would be better than fairies? Nope. This deck desperately needs to be rebuilt. Gemetsu has an article here. Sinran, Ninin, Ninja, Taisen, Neptune, Sojo, Taichi no Kyoin has been delayed to September 16th in Japan. No longer due out August 26th. This was the crossover game between Neptunia and the Sinran Kagura Ninja Girls, where the Neptunia games tend to be very minimally lewd anime characters, and then the Sinran Kagura characters tend to be moderately lewd anime characters with their clothes falling off when they take damage to a certain extent. I don't know if they actually ever get naked or show anything. The thought certainly was that this crossover was probably going to lean the Sinran Kagura characters into being more tame, not lean the Neptunia characters into being less tame, with the whole censorship, which I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but yeah, apparently the Doki Doki Plus game is censored where the blood has been turned black in on the PlayStation version.
It looks like I'm up.
We haven't had any major censorship stories lately, and I don't know if that's just because nobody wants to talk about censorship, or if there's just not been anybody who's really made a big enough stink. I know somebody had a Kickstarter for an adult game, and then PayPal sees their money and stole it, like PayPal tends to do with a lot of projects. But yeah, I don't think there's been any other major stories. There have been games like Subverse that have come out and then been fairly disappointing, so that also hurts the argument, the anti-censorship argument, if you don't have a lot of good examples of well-created adult material and it all is just low-effort, cheap creations. I should have attacked with this first, shouldn't I? Yeah.
A fitting end. What do we have here?
Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2 has a DLC character, Jiren, full power, announced. I don't know this character Jiren though, so I'll leave it at that. A Megaton Musashi anime begins airing October 1st. The game release date has still been to be announced. I don't know what this is. It's a cross-media franchise from the Yokai Watch developer Level 5. The game was planned. It looks like it's super robots. It's probably not anything of real interest, this game. I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't even make it to the West. You've got generic anime characters and robots in a beat-em-up robot game. Which, if done well, that could be interesting, certainly, but it could also very easily be done poorly. Certainly have seen that before.
I'm already a proper lady, you know.
See, Gamma Sutra has this article allegorizing the millennial adolescent experience in Nightmare Temptation Academy. This is another one of those games that is part of their Road to IGF series, so they're just covering games that nobody's ever heard of. Made by UCLA Game Lab. Yeah, this definitely looks more out there than what you'd normally expect to see from a game. It feels very much just like an interactive artwork experience than anything else. Yeah. Could we kill everybody with this? Yes, we could. So let's,
Hey, let's
I think, do that. And then do this.
Hey, let's play. Yeah,
That way we can attack there.
Stop it!
That there.
yeah.
That there.
I was so lonely.
And in return. Yep. I often kind of want to see crazy games that go more avant-garde, as it were. So if there was a real game here, if they could get the gameplay mechanic working, these visuals don't scare me off by any means. But there has to actually be a game there, because the problem is you run into far too many instances of low effort asset flip or just low effort games in general on Steam that try to pretend like there's something high, some kind of form of high art or something of importance that people should check out and play, when really that's not the case. They don't have relevance.
Nice marksmanship.
Yeah. Inherently, art is something that's supposed to be useless, whereas video games kind of don't quite fit under the category of art, because they do have a use in the sense that they're designed to entertain in their gameplay mechanic or in their story or in their video or their audio. We've never really embraced the idea of having games that were designed to shock or awe
My quarry won't escape that easy.
or just disgust.
All systems online.
Those are not things that we've ever, as a gaming community, embraced. Whereas it is reasonable to have a painting that just shocks and awes. And yes, there are horror games that might shock or scare people, but you wouldn't call a bad horror game that scares you but plays awfully a good game. Like, first and foremost, for something to be a game, it has to be a game, and it has that limiting gate that you have to get through first, whereas art doesn't really have to get through that gate. You can call anything art, and very few people can legitimately argue that it isn't art. I don't know if anybody can, actually.
Oh, guinea pigs, where are you?
Moving on, Gamma Sutra has an article here. Robot Gentleman is hiring a writer. They made the game 60 seconds and 60 parsecs. So you can pretty much expect that if they are hiring a writer, they're looking to make a game that is somewhat similar to 60 seconds and 60 parsecs. 60 parsecs didn't really gain any notoriety or attention. 60 seconds was fairly popular because of streamers, I think, more than anything. I didn't really like the game. I felt like 60 seconds, even now when it has a whole bunch of extra content and there might be even some strategies inside that game that are now known that weren't known back when I tried to play it, or now known to me at least. At the core of it, I still feel like 60 seconds isn't much of an experience, or enough of an experience. The general concept of the 60 seconds part, I think, is the problem. To have the first part of your game take 60 seconds to collect resources that are randomly placed around an area, and then have to spend the next 30 to 60 minutes making decisions on some very generic text prompts. It turns the whole game into a interactive choose your own adventure story more than anything else.
Completing termination sequence.
Gamma Sutra has an article here. Head in the cloud, flight simulators, cutting edge technology, tech today and tomorrow. Not sure what this article is really talking about. I guess it's just talking about the technology they use to make the images in Flight Simulator, if you're interested in that. We already talked about Guilty Gear selling 500,000. Yeah, we have a blog. Let's talk about Steam Deck, shall we? From Gamma Sutra. We'll talk about that some more, I suppose. That's a good point to bring the conversation back to the Steam Deck. So yeah, this is the first image that I've been able to bring up so far that shows off the Steam Deck in general. Ignore the laptop in the background, because that's not included, nor does it seem like it's necessary. It will almost certainly have something to let you stream from a PC to the Steam Deck, but it runs by itself. It has its own Linux build on it. I would say the black borders here, fairly wide too, that bezel. So you have an ABXY, which Microsoft buttons. You have a right stick, which is not really where the right stick would have been, but I think in a lot of ways their idea is going to be to get you to use the touchpads a lot more than the right stick and left stick. So Steam and Valve may still very much be coming from the perspective of this is a device to get you to play more of the PC games that are not controller compatible compared to PC games that are controller compatible. Otherwise, yeah, it's going to be weird certainly to move your thumb off the right stick and be right next to the X button. You have a pause and back buttons. You have a D-pad that is very much in a different place. So it is kind of a merger of what the PlayStation does, where the two right sticks are in the right place and then the D-pad's in the wrong place. Depending on whether or not you're a fan of the right and left stick. It's certainly more of a case of just what you've gotten used to, more than anything, I would say.
One helping of this and it's 99 for you.
Then you have the two D-pads, the two touchpads here. Not D-pads. You have a Steam button that you assume will just launch Steam. You have an option button. You have a left and a right speaker. Arguably, maybe not in the best point to have the speakers there. The way the grip is kind of designed, you probably won't have your big meaty hands over these speakers. But if you have a big hand, and depending on how big this device is, you might put your hand directly over this, but probably not, because if you're putting a thumb here, then you're going to have a much lighter grip and not a tight grip over that. Also, if you stuck your hand here, you're going to hit the button, so that's going to be a problem. There's some potential here of hitting buttons anyways. This little dot here, I believe, is a microphone. I think this is maybe an LED. This part we know diagonally is 7 inches. So if everything's to scale, then you can expect 3 or 4 inches in this direction from this point to this point. If that helps anything. Let's see if we can watch this video. In the hands of someone, that doesn't look particularly small. They are calling out that, let's pause this, that they've built the thumbsticks to be good, so no Joy-Con drift. You're getting a right bump, a right trigger that's a bit shorter throw, and then you're getting a third and fourth trigger, which arguably I'm not sure that many people are going to want to use. There is a USB-C here, so you could potentially put a camera slightly askew, but you can't put it directly in the center because that's where an active fan is going to be blowing out the the cooling, and I assume this is also cooling happening. You have a power button, volume up, volume down, and a headset connector, which arguably you probably should have just put another USB-C on there and had a USB-C on the go device to connect to a headphone, because let's face it, at this point the headphone jack is dead and another USB-C is way more important. That's probably a reset button that's enabled or embedded deeper. So it's 1280 by 800. Dockable with external display. Let's see. This is called the quick access button. And a lot of this, what is being said, is just word for word what was on the website. A lot of this is using Proton as a middle translation software to make Windows games run on Linux, which seems like that is slightly like Games for Linux in the Wine emulator. So yeah, it once again brings me to the thought that it introduces an interesting conversation. It doesn't do anything amazing. And I don't know how it really could have done anything amazing, but it definitely doesn't do it. The thing I think they could have done better is they've got to figure out a way to subsidize the price, and I don't know how they pull that off, because it's starting at $500, which is fine for a laptop, but it's probably still not going to be as good as a $500 laptop because of all the special hardware set up. But it's still like on its way. The same cost as getting a Xbox Series S, or on its way to getting a Switch and several games. But I guess you also need to define success there. If Steam and Valve can convince people to buy the Steam Deck as their third purchase, even, that's probably success. If they can get anyone who has a Xbox Series S or X, and then their second gaming, because their hardcore gamer device was the Nintendo Switch, and then their third gaming device is the Steam Deck, that's probably where they should shoot for, is to have it be the third option over the example where it is the fourth choice, and so a hardcore gamer would get like the Xbox and then the PlayStation and then the Switch, and then never get the Steam Deck, or only get the Steam Deck as the fourth console, or later. So yeah, it would be a massive success if somehow it got people who are not so hardcore gamers and started off with a Nintendo Switch and then wanted to go to PC gaming to get all the games that aren't on the Switch or just don't play that well on the Switch. That would be a massive success. Or if it got the small audience of people that just kind of hate Nintendo and don't want to play any Nintendo games, and so they have either a PS4 or Xbox, and they get the Steam Deck. I would say they pretty much should define success as if they could get a better version for the same price out in 6 months to a year, slightly better screen, slight improvements, maybe on the amount of RAM, even though the RAM itself is fairly high. Guess I'll just play this. Guess I'll just play this.
What do we have here?
Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Cheese Cube. We're gonna have to burn through some of these games just to make sure I've seen all the news. This obviously looks like garbage. $4.49. Here we have a game called Stack Up or Dive Trying, which doesn't look like enough of a game for me. Seems like what you're trying to do is basically build with a Tetris idea, a floor is lava type experience to get higher and higher. And it really just feels like there's too much variety for these kinds of concepts. Single player and online PvP, $5.94, bunch of languages. Nah, I just don't think there's a game I want to play there. Here we have one called Tank Guards, which doesn't look interesting. $1.79, English and Chinese. Let's come over here and play some more. If we do this, and then this.
Hey, let's play.
And then we evolve
The hunt
this.
has only begun.
Hit that,
Did I get it wrong?
that, and that.
At least we got our mark.
Yeah, we have a game on Steam called Ambush Convoy Strike. I think we already covered this game. Yep, like a tower defense game. $4.24, English and Japanese. Here we have Nethus Inar's Fate, which looks like a fantasy Skyrim type game, maybe a tower defense game. Early access single player only with English full audio. What's funny is that it's tagged as multiplayer. I don't see any multiplayer other than split screen co-op, which certainly we'll get back to the Steam Link or Stream Deck. I even forget the name of it now. The name's not good. It's too many things have Steam in the name already. But yeah, split screen shared or split screen co-op is not going to work on a Steam Deck. Obviously.
A divine summons brings me here.
Online multiplayer would still work the same. I guess I'll put this game Inar's Fate on the fall list.
Drop first, my bolts or your tears?
But yeah, you probably, if you're doing any real hardcore gaming, don't want to be playing on Wi-Fi. The Steam Deck would have made a lot more sense if that card game Artifact had succeeded. Honestly, I think Valve probably has realized that they needed to push PC purchasing forward, because every single other PC manufacturer out there has severely dropped the ball as far as maintaining and creating interest around that content type of content.
Hey, let's play.
Okay. One,
This is my last job.
2, 30.
Oh, the blueprint.
Next, we have a game on Steam here called VR Monkey King Kung Fu with Chinese Beauties, and it looks very rough. This is kind of a VR game where you're like, I think, fighting Chinese characters as Monkey King, but I couldn't even really tell you. It looks very rough. $1.19 for a VR game is extremely low. Bunch of languages, requires VR. Here we have a game called A Dog Named Motto, which is just a precision platforming
What a
game,
wonderfully cruel
which
world.
is not my style of game. $1.39, bunch of languages. Here we have a game called Pre-Frenchy, which is a top-down twin-stick shooter. Pre-Fantry, interesting made-up word. $4.99. Online PvP. English only. Yeah. I guess I can't really expect anything super crazy for a Steam Deck. It doesn't have like any NFC. I suppose at a certain level, when you start to compare it to when you start to compare it to cell phones, there will be some lacking components, I would think. You're probably not going to have a GPS. You're probably not going to have a compass for whatever
That's too
little
bad.
use the internal compasses on cell phones were. Do I want to evolve this guy? Probably not, but I'll do it anyways.
I feel
You're not going to have a cell phone connection, which
I bestow
honestly, that wouldn't have been a
lightning.
terrible thought to have a 5G connection option. I could see very quickly
unhatched dragon.
putting a USB-C modem, if they make such a thing for a cell phone, into that kind of device, and then you have more portability, and you have something that the Nintendo Switch doesn't have, which is a portable device that can still be online without Wi-Fi.
Stop it.
Although you probably could fairly easily tether any cell phone to the Steam Deck, and probably tether a cell phone to a Nintendo Switch. That's just another device. And if you threw in the cell phone idea, then like it's already got a microphone. It wouldn't be crazy if it could handle text messaging and phone calls. It doesn't have to be a full-featured Android type cell phone or anything. It could just be, yes, we've thrown in this extra feature, so you don't have to have your cell phone with you while you're playing. So yeah, that would be something you would think about. There's no front-facing camera, and there's no rear-facing camera either. I don't know if there's a speakerphone speaker on it, so you may very well be limited to either using headphones or appreciating the audio in the small speakers that are built in, which hopefully those are good quality, but they could be terrible. In a lot of ways, the Steam Deck is going to be probably just good enough for most games that you would play on Steam. Yeah, Shadowverse, for instance, already plays on a cell phone. In a lot of ways, the Steam Deck might be a competition against the idea of people just making cell phone versions of their Steam games. Although it tends to go the other direction in people making Steam versions of their cell phone games. And I have said many times before that Steam really needs to be on Android as a secondary store that you would install the Steam app, and when you bought a copy of something that had a mobile version, you got the mobile version via the Steam app for free on your cell phone, instead of potentially having to purchase the game twice or purchase the two different versions of the similar game, or put half of your sales have half the sales going through Google and half of your sales going through Steam.
Bow before Dark Dragoon, ruler of the skies.
I wouldn't be surprised if at some point they actually do embrace that idea and we start to see the Steam app do a lot more and actually allow for side loading of APKs for AAA games you bought, or even side loading the soundtracks to a cell phone through the Steam app would be useful.
You don't know when to quit.
If I think about it though, if it weren't for the screen, that screen is the first thing that jumped out at me, and that was my knee-jerk response on the Steam Deck. If it weren't for the screen, and they could give me a nice 10-inch screen, something the size of an iPad Air tablet, just a really small iPad type screen, that would potentially work very well compared to the Android tablet that I have, because I don't use my Android tablet that much, and so I could get more use out of it certainly if it had a big screen. But when I do use my tablet, it is mostly to read comic books, so
It's too late.
I occasionally do that. Very rarely do it actually, but that's what it's for, and that's why it needs a big screen. And so if that could be addressed, then I see a potential future out there where I could get a Steam Deck and get more use of a Steam Deck than having a tablet. Because they do serve a little bit of a difference. It's hard to make an argument that if you are using a tablet, it's hard to make an argument that a really big cell phone can replace a tablet. It's also hard to make the argument that a Windows PC hooked up to a TV can replace the tablet for me. So a middle ground, replacing what that middle ground is, could work. But also, I think it's important to point out that I think I probably paid at most $250 for kind of a refurbished tablet, and so going from $250 to, oh, I think the Steam Deck starts at like $500 is a major step upward. And I'd really have to ask myself if I would have the extra time. And as a YouTube content creator, the Steam Deck doesn't really make a lot of sense because you can't stream with it. So unless I was just going to commit to playing twice as much, if not way more, video games on a daily basis, any time or emotional energy I'm spending playing on the Steam Deck is time and emotional energy I should be spending making content in front of my main computer and my microphone. But that's only for YouTube content creators. Most people, if you're playing Binding of Isaac and just having fun with that, and that Binding of Isaac is kind of the perfect example of where the Steam Deck would work well. Rogue Legacy is a good example too. But I think if you start to think about like the Command and Conquer Red Alert bundle, not so sure a game like that was always supposed to be for mouse and keyboard really works. You have a pop-up keyboard you're obviously going to have to use on the Steam Deck, and so that's going to be a limiting factor for some things.
The hunt has only begun.
The uncharted desert awaits. The uncharted desert awaits. What do we have here?
Finish the job.
Yep. Well, I'm still gonna lose. Here we have a game on Steam called BR Astro Smash, which
Nice marksmanship.
looks like nothing. Really looks like a space game where shooting asteroids, but looks bad. $18 English only. That's much more in line for the price of a VR game. Here we have a game called Finding a Prince, the game, which is an RPG Maker game, tagged LGBTQ+, which we've seen less of that lately too. It's kind of in both directions. If Steam has been rejecting, or if Valve has been rejecting low effort games that have like sexual adult content in them, they've been doing it on both sides, and they haven't been letting in the more liberal SJW games and blocking the more straight cis heterosexual content. This game says it's only 20 minutes long for $8.49 English only. Obviously that's going to be a pass. Are we getting anywhere? Not really. Let's try the Swordcraft deck just for some variety. Here we have a game called Lambs on the Road Beginning, which I feel like this is maybe a demo of some kind of survival platforming point-and-click game. It's almost like a Prince of Persia game from the looks of it. Let's see. $2.99. Yeah, it doesn't look bad. I'll put it on the follow list. See how people like it. I guess I can tell it's summer because I have no less than 3 cups and 2 more jugs full of water in my room right now, and I'm still not really overly hydrated. I've been trying to be a little bit more conservative on the air conditioning this summer, but
Too slow.
it probably will be a non-noticeable difference. I also found out my ceiling fan was not at its max setting, so now that it is at its max setting, there's a lot of times where I actually get cold, and so it goes from being too hot to too cold. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Hotel Paris, which a romance set in Paris sounds interesting, but the visuals here make it look like it is just a low effort visual novel, unfortunately. $11.04, English only. I suppose it is a question as to why you can't. Why is it not acceptable in my mind to have just pre-purchased characters? These characters don't look bad in a visual novel. I think what's the problem here is, and let's play a little bit and then I'll get back to it.
It's shiny.
I think what the problem with this is, you have a widescreen game and you don't have the text taking up the full width. You have really tiny text at the bottom here, which maybe those are menus or options. And then you have these characters far in the back when they should be more zoomed in when talking. Or they should be way better integrated into these environments, where this clearly is just a 3D model that's been basically cut and pasted onto either a real world image or a pre-rendered image. And so there's just this disconnect with every image, with the people and the interface and the background, and it just screams kind of low quality. And so, yeah, I guess I have to give myself a little bit of credit. I've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of visual novels. I should be able to spot quality. I should trust that I can spot quality at a bit of a glance. Or at least I have a high chance of correctly spotting quality or not. Here we have a game on Steam called High Risers, which is tagged as an urban survival RPG game. Seems like you just go up floor by floor fighting zombies. So I guess you get to the top and then you get a helicopter, and then that probably starts the next level. $11.89. That sounds like that's a fairly high price. And we can see it's already mixed in the reviews. I think I could probably skip this. There is an idea here that it would be something like the, oh, I forget the name of that card game. Hand of Fate. Yeah, Hand of Fate told you a story, had some random draws. You would go from one point to another point. And so maybe there would be
Let's speed things up.
something there to that idea,
Your mission is to come back alive.
where each floor potentially gave you a different
March on!
experience.
Watch your surroundings.
Too slow.
Don't fall out
Should
of
have
line.
been quicker. Hands up.
But, you know,
Let me divine tomorrow's
minute to minute of your gameplay, if this is what you're looking at, that's going to be fairly boring. You're just not going to get enough variety there. And Hand of Fate definitely addresses that, because Hand of Fate could have been just a fortune teller telling you your story, but instead it
together.
very quickly would jump into other things. A completely different action fighting mode sequence.
Stop staring. Did I predict wrong? Hands up.
Moving on, we have a game called Childhood Gone, Shadowed Wand, which just looks like a low effort
My bolts or
RPG.
your tears?
$8.99. Here we have a game called The Last Stand Legacy Collection, which looks like a zombie tower defense type game. But it doesn't look that terrible. $9.99, single player, English only. It is kind of just a Plants vs. Zombies type game, except for it's humans versus zombies. I think I can put that on the follow list. It might be the kind of zombie game that would help me fill out a Halloween month. Okay.
A soldier is a link in the greater chain.
Let's see. Here we have a game on Steam called House Builder First Job, which seems like you're building igloos in the snow, or you're building log cabins in the forest.
One day we'll reach our goal.
Is this made from the same house builder? A previous existing house builder series? This is English and Polish. Or is this just trying to create some name confusion? Farmer's Life before this. House builder build all over the world. Be My Mom. Yeah, this is a developer who's making some bad games. It's fairly obvious. Okay. Well, do this, I suppose. Do this.
My place is on the front
Do
line.
this.
Let's speed things up. Gotta follow my nose.
That'll do 2 damage. Which
To battle, comrades. You
doesn't
just
really help
don't get
anything.
it. Too slow.
Here we have a game on Steam called Build a Boss, which looks like nothing. $4.99. Here we have a game called Rambo Fuego. Or Fugo, I don't know how you pronounce that. Fuego? Regardless, it just looks like a massive color. $1.39, English only. Here we have a game called Sheba McCurry, which looks like it is match puzzles showing off a picture of a real Sheba dog. Which, cute enough, but probably not worth $3.99. English, Japanese full audio. Name is Hina. Wait a minute, that was weird. They named the dog Hina. They have a pink collar on her. Let me go back and check the footage here. There's something wrong with naming this dog Hina and calling it a her, if I saw the footage correctly, because I'm fairly certain I saw a penis on that dog.
escape that easy.
My song will slay you.
Which maybe that means there's just multiple images or multiple videos of the dog, of multiple dogs, which I wouldn't be surprised if that's exactly what this is it's multiple Shiba Inus. Alright, well, I'm no expert, but maybe that is female. It's kind of hard to tell, particularly on young dogs. But I would have sworn that that was a male dog. And it's hard to tell as far as nipples because they're hairy, and both male and female mammals have nipples. They're just not as prominent on male, typically. Well, so back to my original statement. Probably not worth $4 to play a puzzle game. Next, we have a game on Steam here called Project H, which looks like some pixely escape the room horror game. Yeah, it doesn't look bad for a pixel game, but it's kind of hard to make a bad looking pixel game. It's free, so I guess the price is right. English only. But probably not really worth your time. Here we have Nico Para Catboy Paradise. So the Catboys coming out for the Nico Para series, where previously I think all the Nico Para games had been female cat girls. Japanese full audio, several other languages. We'll put this on the follow list and see if we can, look at Nico Para 1. Nico Para was the one that had nudity in it, and it is cat girls usually. And then by the time they got to the most recent ones, because I guess more of censorship reasons and influence there, they started to take the nudity out. Either that or the audience began to like the game a little bit more. Or they liked the characters enough that they just saw the nudity as a crutch.
Do not seek what is not there.
Let's see. Or maybe I'm wrong about that, because I'm looking at Nico Para 4 and it's still tagged as having sexual content, and it's overwhelmingly positive. Was it 3? Is it? No. 3 says it's tagged with sexual content and nudity too.
Hostile life form detected.
Yep. The third game has an 18+ adult only content. So yeah, in 2017 they charged $10 extra to uncensor it, but by the time they got to volume 4, there's just a $10 theme song for DLC, and any adult content is, I assume, uncensored. So I guess I'm putting the Nico Para volume 4 on the wish list. Although, once again, I've never been able to figure out a way I'd be able to actually cover those games on Steam, on YouTube anyway, so that is ambition without a solution so far.
And those acorns flying out of the woods. Now's a chance for a grand slam.
See, here we have a game on Steam called The First Days of Atlantis, which looks like it is some kind of card-based tabletop game. Visuals don't look particularly great, but I might cut it some slack. $8.99, single player only, English and German.
For the end is near.
I think the single player thing is the thing that kind of kills this idea. Is that if this was a real board game that actually existed in the real world, you'd expect you could play with multiple players, and with no kind of even local co-op or local player versus player, that's just too annoying.
Heavy impact sustained.
Hit that. And then hit that.
Hey, let's play.
The hunt has only begun.
Bad people are evil. Stay away.
Go ahead and hit that one, I guess. And hit that one, I suppose. Little Witch Academia VR Broom Racing is on Steam. I said, I assumed because it was listed only for the PlayStation VR that it was going to be a PlayStation VR exclusive. I was wrong about that. So then there are now at least 2 Little Witch Academia games on Steam, and it would be questionable whether either one of them are really worth playing. This is not a bad idea. It doesn't look particularly great as a game where you're flying on brooms, but I will say so far I have yet to see a Harry Potter VR broom racing experience or a Harry Potter broom racing experience at all. You would think they would have made at least a few Harry Potter racing games that would have made some sense, and they didn't. This is English and Japanese full audio. So, yeah. This probably heavily comes down to whether or not you have a kid who is interested in Little Witch Academia, though. Whether you'd be particularly motivated to purchase or play a game like that, unless you're personally into Little Witch Academia. Let's see. Gamma Sutra has an article. Jinvid raises $113 million to run more interactive live events. Here, Gamma Sutra says Nintendo will spend an estimated $10 more per unit building the OLED Switch, assuming that they didn't also fix the Joy-Con drift, and that cost them some more. There is something, I suppose, to be said about how bad and misaligned the Switch controllers and right stick and left stick are also. So yeah, neither the Steam Deck nor the Joy-Cons actually have the controllers in the place I would like to see the controllers. But it's just going to get down to a near religious fervor belief of the right way to make a controller. And these things change as people find better ways to implement things. Let's see, Gamma Sutra is using photography to document the end of the world in Ururangi Generation. This is another one of those Road to IGF games that you shouldn't be covering. And it's, once again, just a weird looking game that maybe will be on Steam at some point, or maybe won't, because it's not really a game that can compete against other games on Steam, which that's a particularly low bar anyways. And it really doesn't take a lot to compete on Steam. A game I've never heard of called Free Fire has topped 1 billion downloads on Google Play, which I think once again highlights just how out of the loop at least I personally am as far as Google Play games, and how irrelevant I think I would assume Google Play games actually are.
Cheers for a grand slam!
Mean son of a gun, ain't you?
No!
The Legend of Heroes Kuro no Kisekai Japanese box art is now available through Gametsu's website post. The Shoot 'em Up Rolling Gunner Plus Overpower is coming to PS4 in 2021 alongside a limited physical print edition. The Xbox Series XS was the highest grossing US console in June. Ratchet and Clank topped software charts according to Video Games Chronicle. Which this is where Video Games Chronicle as a news source can come into being handy, is they're talking about the Western sales market, whereas Gametsu is going to talk more about the Japanese market. And Gametsutra is not going to directly talk about sales that often at all. So we can see that a list here of the top 20 US games. Scarlet Nexus number 5, that's shocking. Mario Golf Super Rush. Yeah, I guess competition's not particularly that great. Shield and Sword though, not ranking up that high. This. And then what do we want to do?
Move.
Hit this one,
Wah, wah.
and then
Stay away!
hit that one.
Mean son of a gun, ain't you?
Unbelievable!
Video Games Chronicle, Epic praises Valve's amazing move to making the Steam Deck an open platform. It is an open platform in the sense that it's running Linux, and
Done for.
the handheld can theoretically access the Epic Game Store, and that's probably why Epic is
Fire away in the name of
is
justice.
praising it. Yeah. It's interesting that this hand model has tattoos. Or maybe this isn't a hand model. Yeah, this doesn't feel like it's too small. But these might be just digital renders also. Yep. I don't see a scenario where it would have really worked if they came out with this device and they said specifically it could only run Steam and approved software. Like, I just don't think that that's something Valve wants to try and moderate and create a walled garden around. That seems that would be too much work, frankly, for them to try and make a walled garden, and it wouldn't really serve much. As far as Valve is concerned, I think right now the Epic Game Store is not really any real competition, so they're more than happy to potentially put out a PC that could get sold and purchased by some small percentage of people that aren't even planning on using it to game on, instead of trying to lock it down.
End of the skies.
Hey, let's play!
Techland has some open positions. If I click the open positions, Techland is the maker of Dying Light 2, which they're still working on it. Here we can see they've got a decent number of jobs. They tweeted out that they had some jobs listings and didn't realize it was this much. it's weird that they have a senior Python engineer for their website. And then they also have C++ programmers for their games. But I guess it's not that weird. You can't make a C++ website, really. It's possible, but it's not worth the effort. And Python is probably what you need to know to run a website. I have to really think about whether Python's the most important thing you need to know to maintain a website or not.
See you at the next show.
Okay.
I'm already a proper lady, you know.
Gamma Sutra has an article here. The Valve boss Gabe Newell, which boss should probably be in quotes at this point. He's a figurehead at most. Says pricing the Steam Deck, which I hope that's what I've been calling it, or was quote painful. Finding the right price point for its new console was a painful process. Let's see if we can get a direct quote here in a full sentence.
I could get used to this rain.
$3.99 is the cheapest version. Then you step up to higher faster storage speed and more storage for $5.29. So they don't really expect you to buy the lower one. And then the high-end one gives you even faster storage speed and an anti-glare etched glass screen. Each one of them comes with a case for free, which is nice. Although free is relative for spending $400. Let's see. Newell told IGN it was necessary to be, quote, very aggressive to win consumers over and claimed that the price performance was one of the critical factors in the mobile space. Quote, I want to pick it up and say, oh, it all works, it's all fast, it's all... And then the price was secondary and painful. But that was pretty clearly a critical aspect to it. Boy, he's barely even making a understandable sentence there. The first thing was the performance and the experience. That was the biggest and most fundamental constraint that was driving this. So they wanted to make a good computer, and in fairness, even for $400 getting a good computer is asking a lot. Like, you can easily mess that one up and have a $400 laptop that runs like garbage. I'm a little surprised, I will say, that there isn't room for either a second stick of NVMe storage. I think it does have a micro SD card slot, so yes, you could expand the storage that way, but that's not really big enough for the price. Honestly, I could see plugging in a 2.5 inch hard drive, laptop hard drive into it, just a spinning rust hard drive. That would also make some sense. Suppose this would have maybe saved me, but
The hunt has only begun.
yeah.
Resistance is meaningless.
All I need's an opening and you're toast.
Let's see. Here we have a game on Steam that's all in Asian letters. It's a visual novel. I think we already talked about this one. Yep. Can't put it on the fall list because it's not in English.
I serve in hopes of a better
Here we have a game called Swing Dungeon, which is kind of cut the rope at a higher pace and more frustration and precision. It's coming soon. I imagine a game like this could be good, though. Just this high action, you've got to always be moving. to try and collect things and defeat enemies. Here we have a game on Steam called Balls Out of Control, which looks like it's probably a top-down shooter or just a Asteroids clone. $1.99, English only. Here we have a game called Deca, which is tagged as having nudity. Looks like a horror game. Looks like there's actually some horror aspects to this. $18.99, English full audio. Seems like they've got a real monster that they really want to highlight and not just hide in the darkness. We'll put that on the follow list. Positive looks to it. Yeah, at this rate, it does not seem like we're going to get too much. As far as wins. Gametsu says Kochiri Haha Naru Hoshi Yori details the survival life in Ikebukuro relationships. This is a Yuri visual novel, girl on girl romance. And it looks like it's set in a post-apocalyptic world. Which, yeah, I remember this game. There's like a collection of 4 or 5 girls in post-apocalypse. Which certainly is an interesting concept to put a twist on it and say, hey, here we're going to tell you this romance story, but hey, let's just set it in the apocalypse so it is a little bit different. Although when you start getting to some of the Japanese stories, the number of romance stories that take place in a fantasy isekai, another world, start to outweigh the number of romance stories that take place in just the regular real world, and it might be better to just keep things simple. Here we have a game called Wanhan Vengeful Spirit, which seems to be a kind of fast action stealth game. Well, this definitely looks more polished and thought out than your average Chinese game. I think there might be something to this. $12.79, bunch of languages. None simplified Chinese is one, but I'm not 100% sure it actually is a Chinese game, or made by Chinese people. But yeah, that definitely deserves a follow. Here we have a game called Squiggle, which looks very weird. Some kind of like 3-dimensional moving of glowing neon balls and glowing neon tubes. I don't think my eyes could tolerate looking at something like this, and it looks like a weird VR experience. $17.99, English only. Yeah.
Too slow.
I think I have to pass on Squiggle. Next we have a game on Steam called The Annoying Game, which looks like a frustration platformer for $3.99. I think we already talked about that one. Here we have a game called Glim, which doesn't look like anything of interest. It's free. English, Japanese, and Chinese. Well, I guess the price is right. Seems like it's a co-op game where the 2 players have to line up their attack and form a drag and pull action, which kind of means you can't play it single player. Yeah, you can't.
a beacon of hope.
Next we have Unsung Knight, which looks like it's a platformer. It's tagged as a card battler too. That's weird. Yeah, it feels like it's two different games in one, because the video here is definitely showing a lot of jumping and platforming to, I assume, avoid encounters, but the actual encounters are card based. Yeah, I just don't think that works. $3.99 English and Chinese. I'm gonna skip that. Here we have a game called Aces in the Dust, which looks like a fly around in a plane shooting things game. Doesn't look too bad. We don't see a ton of these. Early access, free, English only. I guess I can put this on the fall list, but because it's free, there's not very much video game criticism that needs to be said there.
March on!
Let's see.
I'll add this to my shine. So
Hit
that's how
that.
you use it. Mean son of a gun, ain't you?
Here we have a game on Steam called Spinner Breaker, which looks like a mobile phone Arkanoid game. Although there might be an idea that improves Arkanoid a little bit by having there be breakable bricks on the top and bottom, and all four corners being valid places to bounce the ball. But that still doesn't really make Arkanoid interesting. It just slightly improves it. Here we have a game called We Are Open,
Get used to this range.
which is tagged as a hidden object game. To me, it looks more just like an asset flip game where you're simulating shopping, which I don't know why you'd want to simulate shopping, particularly grocery shopping. Yeah, I can't imagine wanting to do that. Here we have a game that's all in Asian characters. Looks like just an RPG maker. 59 cents, Chinese only. Alright, I can see the beginning of the end. So I want to cover just a couple more games and
Let's speed things up.
we'll call it a day fairly early on this Friday, which is fine. As far as actual victories and getting the daily quest done, I don't think we're going to do that.
My loyalty is ironclad.
Stop staring.
Hit that one.
What's this strange reading?
Too
and
slow.
hit that one.
See you at the next show.
Here we have a game on the Steam called The Immortal Mayor, which is some kind of city sim for what looks like a Chinese city. Looks like a Chinese game
The magic of
with all the
flowers is
text there.
profound.
$16.99 English and Chinese.
Delta cannon, fire.
Here we have another game that's all in Asian lettering and looks to me like it's a visual novel. I'm not sure Chinese or Japanese on this one. The amount of cleavage tells me Japanese, but the lack of consistent art style tells me Chinese. $3.59 Chinese only. Yeah. Yeah, we have a game on Steam called Piranha Solitaire, which seems to be just a solitaire game of no real visual polish. $2.99 English only. And here we have another game that's all Asian characters that's tagged as a puzzle platformer and a clicker. $2.69 Chinese only.
A soldier is a link in the greater chain.
That, of course, is not making it to the fall list. So now what I'm going to just do is look at everything I have left and see if there's a specific game that needs to be talked about. Like F1 2021 is out. It's rated very positively. We can put that on the follow list easily to consider later. $59.99. This really is just going to come down to the idea, do I want to play a Formula 1 racing game? Does a Formula 1 racing game need this many hyper-realistic like face scans of people and cutscenes of people? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I guess maybe Formula 1 fans really know who those people are more. Yeah, we have one called Wildlife Match we can quickly dismiss because it's just a match 3 game. It's $6.29. $6.29, English only. Yeah, Warhammer Battle Sector is not out yet. Not another zombie game we can dismiss easily because it's 99 cents and nothing. Let's come home. I'm trying to see, more than anything, is I thought I saw some adult content games that came out this Friday. Otherwise, we are maybe 2 weeks into the last time we saw a game with nudity and sexual content being released on Steam. Not that that should really concern me too much. I'd start to get a little concerned if we started hitting 3 or 4 weeks and we hadn't seen anything in that direction. But yeah, video games are just slow in general as far as coming out. Yeah. I would need 2 more victories for the daily mission to get gems, 2 more victories of Forcecraft to Dragoncraft to get 40 gold, 4 more victories on top of those 2 more victories to get Swordcraft or Bloodcraft victories. I have another arena that I need to play offline if I decide to, but I don't think I want to do any more of that at all. See, we have this game, Distant Memorajo, which is tagged as educational visual novel. And it looks like a Japanese visual novel, but it's $17.99 Japanese only. I can put it on the follow list, but that's not tagged as having any adult content. So I'm kind of just clicking through everything fairly quickly. Like, we can dismiss this. Drunk soccer is the best soccer. I wonder how many people do play soccer drunk, whether it is a lot or little. It feels like that's probably a mistake. Here we have one called Dance With Me, which looks like it's a asset flip anime girl dancing rhythm game. It's Beat Saber, basically. $4.79. That idea, with some more polish to it, would actually work to have a Beat Saber game. About 10 more things I'm just going to click through real fast. Here we have another Asian named card game. Something Card Maker. None of the screenshots want to load. Early access $8.99, English and Chinese. Not really seeing anything particularly interesting here because I suspect any of the text on these cards are only in Chinese really, and this doesn't look visually polished enough to be a good card game, collectible card game, or otherwise. It's single player only too, which is a big problem. Here we have a game, Asian characters, Hanabi Summer Festival, some kind of side-scrolling platforming game. There might be something to this, but English is not supported. 1999, Japanese only, so we will have to skip that. 3 more tabs. Here we have Bill and Cross Trick or Treat, lower only, Picross game, easily dismissed, $2.99, several languages. Okay, so that leaves about a handful of things to talk about. When we come back on Monday. Libretto just saying that they put a deposit down. I think the deposit is like $10, so it's not a major deposit towards a $500 device. It's not 10% or anything, where it's like $50 or $100. Where I wouldn't have been surprised really if they had said that you had to put $100 down to get something 3-4 months later, just so that they could spend that money to make sure they've got enough units. The interesting thing about Libretto buying a Steam Deck, though, is that Libretto still has not been released in any form to the public on Steam. And that's really where the Steam Deck could be very useful, is if you could use the Steam store to install Libretto and the emulator cores, and then get the ROMs from your favorite legal source. So yeah, that would be nice. Certainly it would definitely give something like the Raspberry Pi portable builds and the other portable emulation devices some runs for their money. Typically, if you do have a portable Raspberry Pi device, you're paying more. You're paying more for them than you really would expect to pay for them. I'm going down my Twitter feed right now to see if there's any new news to talk about before we wrap up. So yeah. That being said, you are still probably a fool if you were to spend even $350 for a device just to play emulation. So you get that combined effect, and that would make a lot of sense. And I suppose there is also there's some speculation here from Video Game Chronicles that the Steam Deck could be a handheld Xbox Game Pass machine, which it could be anything. I could see Microsoft working specifically to make that happen, and then Microsoft could better compete with Nintendo and have more Microsoft branded Games Pass subscriptions. Yeah, I definitely would have to think, though, how difficult would it be to install Libretto and all the cores and get it to use something either like Pegasus or Emulation Station on that specific version of Linux, considering how Emulation Station was pretty much abandoned, and the RetroPie version of Emulation Station is the only one that's really still being worked on, and Pegasus probably will work if it runs on Linux, but wouldn't work if it doesn't run on Linux, certainly. And I don't know what your other options really would be. There's going to be probably some hassle trying to get the emulation cores to run with a Steam Deck and the 2 thumb pads, unless the thumb pads work some other way than the way I think they work. It could be that one of the trackpads acts as like a scroll wheel, but yeah. The Steam Deck, much like the Microsoft controller and the PlayStation controller, are very far away from what most emulated games are expecting. Certainly. And they always have been. It'll be very interesting, just to get back to the idea of how much of a conversation starter it will be. It'll be very interesting when we start to see some performance results and not just like benchmark results on the Steam Deck, but how well does this intensive game like Control run, how well does Witcher 3 run, how terribly does Cyberpunk run on the Steam Deck, because that's really where the truth will be in the numbers, certainly. Is if it struggles on games that it shouldn't struggle on, then it will not sell well. But if it plays very well with performance, then it might sell very well. There is also a school acceptance factor that probably would never have been addressable anyways, but parents love to think when they're buying a PC for a kid to game on that they're actually buying it for them to study, and the Steam Deck does not look like a device that would be acceptable in school at all. Again, unless you're doing Zoom classes and you could put a camera on it, and then the kid could be lying down in bed paying attention to the school class, which I bet the teachers would hate if the kids were actually lying down in bed while listening to the classes to the teacher, because teachers often demand everybody sit upright and pay attention like good little soldiers. So yeah, that probably would cause trouble too. But yeah, if you bought somebody a gaming laptop, and then they were taking it to school and saying they were taking notes on the laptop, you might be able to pull that off. If they pull out the Steam Deck and they're trying to type in notes with the on-screen keyboard, I don't think people are gonna buy that at all. Anyways, well, we've gone 2.5 hours. I think that is more than enough for a Friday. So that's going to be it for the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wish list. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.